everyone, it's Sarah, and today I'm going to talk about Twilight, Life and Death, and Stephenie Meyer. This is a subject I have a lot of thoughts about. I did a blog post a few years ago about how I respect Stephenie Meyer, and I certainly talked a lot about this during the Twilight Storytellers project. This was the short film project that I participated in briefly. My screenplay outline was actually chosen in the first round, so it's something that has been on my mind. Okay, so let me talk about Twilight for a second. I totally understand all of the feminist arguments against Twilight. And I also understand the writers' arguments against Twilight. But when I first read the series, I was going through a very difficult time in my life. But those books, while I was reading them, I was able to completely escape and completely immerse myself in this world, which I hadn't been able to do with a book for a while before that. And the series kind of got me back into reading. So for that reason, the books will always have a special place in my heart. Also, I find that I am kind of fascinated with Stephenie Meyer. She never wanted to be a writer, and then one day she has this dream, she writes it down, the dream becomes a book, and bam, 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 she gets a literary agent, 3-book deal with a huge advance in a very short period of time, and becomes a bestseller. Now, I know they say there are no overnight success stories, but I think in the publishing world, she is probably the best example of an overnight success story. Okay, most of us writers who do this for a while have to deal with a lot of rejection and a lot of criticism. Like, a lot. So, by the time we get published, and the masses are trashing our books on Goodreads, it might still be painful, but, you know, the majority of us have toughened up enough to at least know how to ignore most of the criticism or just kind of brush it off. But throughout this whole time before Twilight was published, Stephenie Meyer dealt with virtually zero rejection or criticism before she became a best-selling author. And when all of the Twilight hate and backlash started happening, I think it really, really affected her. I think it would have affected anybody, but a new writer who hasn't had to even deal with much criticism or rejection up until that point, I mean, can you imagine how that would feel? So when I hear people hating on Twilight, or really any book, the writer part of me always puts myself in the author's shoes. So I think this is why, for the most part, I don't like to talk negatively about books. Is there a place for negative criticism of a book? Absolutely. I don't consider myself to be a book critic at all. I am above all a writer and a lover of stories and the written word. So when I talk about books, I want to talk about books that I love. That being said, I'm about to talk about a book that I didn't quite love, and that is Life and Death. Okay, so the 10th anniversary edition of Twilight just came out, and along with that, Stephenie Meyer wrote an entire reimagined version of Twilight called Life and Death. And in this version, all of the characters' genders have been swapped. So when I heard about this, I thought it was really cool and really fun, and I really was interested to read it. I got about to the meadow scene, and then I decided to DNF it. But then I went back and I kind of skimmed through and read the end, because the end is different. So she wrote this whole long foreword before Life and Death, explaining why she wrote it. She said she was tired of seeing people say that Bella was a weak female character and a damsel in distress. So she wanted to prove a point that the character would have needed as much saving, I guess, if it had been a male and the vampire had been a female. I will say that this reimagining did prove that point for me, and Stephenie Meyer herself does not consider this to be a real book And for that reason, I think it kind of succeeded on some level. But I really don't think they should have marketed it as a whole other Twilight book. I understand her publisher wanted to give people a reason to buy the new edition, and hey, it worked on me because I wasn't going to buy it, and then I really wanted to read this reimagining. So, okay, probably did work. But I really think Stephenie Meyer should have just released it on her website or something, maybe done an ebook version for cheaper, because I don't think it was really new content. So much of the book was the exact same as Twilight, with just different names and different pronouns. That's why I really didn't want to continue with it, because it got to a point where I was like, okay, I've already read this. I had a lot of trouble wrapping my brain around the new characters, probably because a lot of the story was exactly the same and a lot of the dialogue was the same. Of all of the gender-swapped characters, I feel like Edith, which was the female version of Edward, was the one who worked the most for me. She was really the only character who I could actually picture separate from her male counterpart. I think because it was told in first person perspective as Beau, I kept picturing him being Bella. So everyone is complaining that she should just write something new and stop milking the cash cow, or that she should have at least finished Midnight Sun, which is Twilight from Edward's perspective, that she was working on, and then it got leaked back in 2008 or 2009. And then she stopped. But I feel like people are not taking her story and the way she got started as a writer into account. It seems like she was really creative and prolific up until Breaking Dawn. She wrote all 4 books in the series and The Host in a relatively short period of time. And The Host, I actually think, is her best book, and I don't think it gets the credit that it deserves because of the stigma around Twilight. People are almost like embarrassed to say that they like Stephenie Meyer, which I don't really think is right. So it seems like after she got all of that hate, it kind of crushed her writing soul a little bit. This is all speculation on my part. I could be totally wrong, but this is just what I think happened. Even if she had written a lot, I imagine she would probably be pretty afraid to publish anything after all of that hate. I mean, I've been dealing with rejection and criticism my entire life, and there's still a part of me that is afraid to publish things and produce my plays and get my writing out there, because no matter what, when you write something, people are going to criticize it. People are going to be mean. People are going to say things that will be hurtful. I do wish she did not feel the need to be so kind of defensive, though. And I feel like a big part of Life and Death was her being defensive. I kind of wish she would have answered the feminism argument by writing a new story and giving us a really strong female character. But I can understand why she did what she did. And I do feel like at least it seems like she is open to writing and publishing again. I have obviously thought way too much about this, but as a writer, I am just fascinated by the different ways that people become writers. So, do any of you have as many thoughts on Twilight and Stephenie Meyer as I apparently do? Have any of you read the new Life and Death? What did you think of it? I would love to hear from you in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you would like to see more videos about books, writing, or music. Thanks so much for watching and listening to my ramblings, and I will see you in the next video.